This is Reimagining Higher Education, your go-to podcast with remarkable education leaders sharing personal stories from their experience in and around the sector, including reflection and hope for progress in the sector. With your host, Professor Judyth Sachs, former PVC Learning and Teaching at the University of Sydney, Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Provost at Macquarie University, and Special Advisor in Higher Education at KPMG, and now Chief Academic Officer at Studiosity. Welcome.
It gives me great pleasure to be able to talk to Professor Mouzughi, who is currently the Provost at the University of Birmingham Dubai campus. But I'm not going to introduce you any further than that, because you have had a remarkable career and you've worked in some remarkable jobs. So could you talk to me about your career, how you got to where you got to, and really, in particular, what's it like being a woman leader in the Middle East?
Well, Judyth, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation, for having me. I'm looking at the list of other contributors to this podcast series and really feeling humbled and honoured and in awe of that really impressive list. So thanks very much for having me on this morning. I've been looking forward to reflecting and talking to you about, I guess, the journey. Let's maybe start at the very beginning and in terms of where I started and how I've come about. I'm originally from Libya. I was born in Libya, but I identify as a British Libyan. So I left Libya when I was very young. I was only 7. My parents had moved for work. My father had moved for work purposes to London. And that's where I grew up and that's where I studied. And
that's why you've got this accent.
Indeed, that's why I've got a distinctly British accent, absolutely. So I grew up in the UK with within a kind of an Arab Libyan family, I guess, but a kind of almost a dual identity. I'm privileged to speak Arabic as well, and I'm bilingual. And apparently, the one of the definitions of bilingual is you dream in both languages, which I do dream in both languages, depending on what it is I'm dreaming about. So that that also forms part of the story. But I grew up and I studied my undergraduate. I did business and management, and actually I studied in an American style kind of liberal arts type, which gave me a really good grounding, very good understanding of the broader, I guess, business and management perspectives. Went on to do my MBA in Heriot Watt in Edinburgh. Enjoyed that, and then started work. I actually started my career in industry, not in academia. So I worked in insurance, and I ended up becoming a kind of a project manager in the insurance industry. And enjoying that. Very fast-paced. Financial services is extremely fast-paced all over the world, but in the UK particularly at the time. And we're talking late 90s, early 2000s now. Gosh, I'm feeling very old as I say this now, but it does feel ages ago. And that was actually the catalyst for going back into academia, because I felt that we were continuously training new recruits into financial services, and they're being paid a little bit more money by the competitor institute or organizations, but we were losing them. We were losing that knowledge that comes with that. So I spoke to my boss at the time, and I said to him, look, I'd like to do some more research into managing knowledge, into how we can retain knowledge in the institute. I don't think I knew it was called knowledge management at the time. So I said to him, I think we need to understand how we retain some of this training that we're doing, some of this knowledge. And he said, well, what do you mean, Yusra? What do you want to do? I said, look, I think I could do a PhD. I could start a PhD. And I think times have probably changed since then. And he said, well, okay, that sounds good. What would you like from me? And I said, I'd like you to pay for it. And I'm not kidding. This was how the conversation went. I remember it distinctly. It was a Friday morning. I went into his office and I spoke to him. And I came away with an agreement for him to fund my PhD, or for the institution, obviously for the organization I was working at in Liverpool at the time, to fund my PhD. And me being quite pushy, I guess, and quite cheeky at times, I said to him, look, you can't do a PhD without having some time to work on it. So I will need some time away from work. And he said, well, what do you need? I said, well, I will need a day a week. In my mind, I was thinking, if I ask for a day a week, he'll probably negotiate it down to about half a day, which is fine, and I can do that. And he said yes. So I walked out of his office 45 minutes later, agreement to for him to fund for the institution to fund the PhD, or for the company to fund the PhD, and a day a week to study. So that was wonderful, and that was the start of me exploring the idea of further study and academia in a very different guise. My first experiences were as a full-time student, no family commitments, nothing. The PhD was very different in terms of, you know, I was married at the time. I had work responsibilities, a very different journey, I guess. I started my PhD, and before I knew it, I was made an offer to do some teaching at the university where I started my PhD, which is Liverpool John Moores. And it just really struck me, Judyth, about the opportunity that could pose. I was doing very well in financial services and my kind of roles in project management. I could see the growth, but the opportunities that as an Arab Muslim woman to have an opportunity to be teaching in an academic institution in the UK, to be teaching within the business and management field, not necessarily possibly the humanities, which would have been more, and I know this is very kind of stereotypical, but that was the situation. And I took a jump. I decided to leave industry and start back at the very bottom, doing sessional teaching. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed interacting with the students, getting back into the literature, understanding where all of this comes from, and trying to get the students to move along with me on that. So I started as a sessional lecturer, and then, which, you know, for those who are not aware of the idea of a sessional lecture, it's almost like a on-demand, you know, you depending on need, you would have the hours and the teaching requirement. And then a job came up, and I was invited to apply for the job. And I did, and you know, I was fortunate to be made an offer for the, you know, for the lecturing post. But that came with a request along with it. As a condition of employment, I also had to do the PG cert, so the postgraduate certificate in learning and teaching in higher education. So at that point, Judyth, I was moving careers. So I'd moved from industry to academia. I was doing my PhD. I was embarking on this postgraduate certificate, and I was also pregnant, about to have my first child. So you can imagine that I had a little bit of a heavy load at the time, which was, you know, interesting. And I have to say, the support my husband and my family gave me was immense. But at the end of the day, you know, we lived in Liverpool. We didn't have family in Liverpool. It was more, I guess, emotional and moral support than actually somebody coming in and helping you to get things done. But I did the PG cert. I had my daughter and continued to work and plod along on the PhD. It was a hard journey. It really was a very difficult journey in terms of the time commitments. And I used to wake up at 4 o'clock every morning. That was the only window of time I'd have. 4:20 till 7 o'clock was my PhD time. The rest of the day was taken in terms of work commitments or childcare commitments, or, you know, just getting on with life. So it was an interesting and challenging journey, but it taught me a lot of resilience and a lot of I guess strength. I went on to you know, develop along the academic career, so moving on from lecturer, senior lecturer, applied and became a principal lecturer or reader as we would know it in the UK. And then an opportunity came along to be involved in the development of the doctoral programs at the university. So I had an opportunity to build, I guess, the DBA, Doctorate of Business Administration, put together the case study, the business case, the how do we make this work, the the financials, the market, the feasibility study, etc., etc. And I led on the development and initiation and setup of the program. And thankfully that was successful. So I managed the doctoral programs, both PhD and DBA, for about 8 years actually for the university. And it was such a great learning experience because I had moved from teaching first year, second year students to final year students to executive MBA, executive master students, whether it was MBA or otherwise, to working with and developing stronger, longer relationships with PhD or doctoral students more broadly. And I found that to be extremely rewarding. It's wonderful teaching on the undergraduate programs because you see a very different type of student, but the short-lived nature of the relationship, it was 3 months they were in for that semester, they took your module and off they went, and they did something else. So for me, the longer relationships with the doctoral programs was where with the doctoral students was where I really, really enjoyed. And I guess I still miss that. That's one of the pieces that, having moved on in my career, I don't get to do so much now. And having done all of that, I was then approached by somebody who I'd met in a conference who'd actually lost my business card and looked me up on LinkedIn. So a gentleman called Kevin, Dr. Kevin Dunseith, approached me from Oxford University, worked for the consultancy arm of the University of Oxford, UK. They were consulting on the development of a new university in Muscat in Oman, and they were looking for a deputy vice chancellor academic affairs. And he thought it might be a good idea for me to have a think about that position, which I did. And I interviewed for the post, and it all happened ever so quickly, Judyth. I interviewed, and during the interview, I felt that it was going a little bit too seriously, but they were asking, when can you start? And at that point, I'd never even been to Oman. So I said, look, I think what I need to do is visit and get an understanding of the situation. Bearing in mind, at that point, I'd spent 35 years in the UK, had never worked anywhere outside of the UK. So I visited and I really liked what I saw. Oman is a beautiful country. It's a beautiful place, it's beautiful people, very kind, very polite, very aspiring, very high work ethic. So I interviewed in June or July, I think I visited Oman in August, early August, and I moved over in December of that same year with 2 young children at that point. So my daughter was 14, my son was 7. My daughter was 13, my son was 7. And moving to set up a new university from scratch. And when I say a new university, I mean absolutely new university. It was still on paper at the time. We were securing contracts, agreements, campus, students, licenses, programs, everything. And it was amazing as a startup. It was the then Chancellor, myself as Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, Deputy Vice Chancellor Finance, and the project manager, and one admin support. So it was a very small team, worked very closely together to develop this brand new university. So that gave me a breadth of expertise in terms of understanding everything in the academic development of universities, breadth of programs, undergraduate, postgraduate, governance structures, and you name it, to everything in terms of developing a campus, choosing a site, being involved in actual physical development of a campus. So I used to go into the site every Thursday morning, wear a hard hat and boots, and go in and walk around and look at windows and thickness of windows, and where do you place the switches, and I always say, I was involved in the choice of the tiles for the bathrooms. It was that level of granularity, which is wonderful. It really was really building the team, doing interviews, bringing people on, onboarding them, getting them settled. And sometimes you got it right and sometimes you didn't get it right. So there was a lot of that. 18 months on, I was asked to become Vice Chancellor. So that was a really important point in my career, not only because of the position, of the leadership position, but also because I was the first, and I believe I remain the only female Vice Chancellor in Oman. And that's a position of responsibility on many fronts for us as women, I guess, but also for female leadership generally, for Arab female leadership. So it was something I really enjoyed, and worked hard to ensure that we could really portray the best image possible. Spent 5.5 years, beautiful years in Oman, developing the university, and when I left, we had graduates, we had programs, we had alumni, we had partnerships, we had industry partnerships. We'd had quite a few firsts that I'm very proud of, and we had a really strong team. So that was Oman. I then moved on to Bahrain to head up the Royal University for Women. Another really interesting piece of the puzzle, in the sense that I'd never worked in an all-women's setting, not a school, not a university, I'd never led anything of that type. So it was amazing to see the energy that an all-women's university could bring, the strength of the ambition, the breadth of what those girls wanted to achieve was really amazing. So I was there for 2.5 years, and I really enjoyed it. It was a difficult period because of COVID. I moved during COVID, and moving house is difficult. Moving country is even more difficult. But doing all of that during COVID was not wise. But nonetheless, we did that. And then this opportunity in Birmingham came along, the University of Birmingham Dubai. And for me, this brought my two worlds together. My understanding of the UK higher education system, having spent 16, 17 years in different positions in university in UK, and then my understanding of the Gulf, and having worked in Oman and in Bahrain 8 years now in this region. Having a campus for us as the University of Birmingham, having a Dubai campus, is a really strong statement in terms of our commitment to what we want to do, and our commitment to globalization, and to having that kind of broader, delivering our mission much more broadly on a global landscape. It brought my two worlds together, and it really is an amazing opportunity, and I'm really, really privileged to be able to represent the university out here in Dubai. So I've been in post now about 7 months. I joined in early January, so actually 8 months now, and have enjoyed every single minute of it. It's a huge learning process, lots to calibrate and understand in terms of the broader university, but also how that plays out in Dubai and in a UAE Gulf setting, but drawing on the strengths and multiple strengths of a 125-year-old institution into a campus, a brand new campus here. So I guess that's the story, a bit of a long-winded story, I guess now, but I just thought it was important to stop on those.
It's a remarkable story. What are the challenges facing higher education in both the Emirates, but also in the Middle East? Because in many respects, the job you're in at the moment, you're also having to navigate the challenges facing higher education in the UK, as well as the challenges facing higher education in the UAE. So can you talk to me a little bit about the challenges that the sector faces, but the challenges you face both as a leader and a bilingual leader and a woman leader? How many identities do you need to hand a mother and a wife?
Do you know, when I taught on the doctoral programs, one of the first exercises I did with the students when they first arrived was 20 I ams. The 20 I ams exercise is what I used to call it. And I'd give them a blank piece of paper, no computers, and just I'd ask them to write 20 statements starting with I am. And how do you identify yourself? It was really interesting, actually, Judyth. I don't have any rigorous research. I should have done some rigorous research around the differences, but it was very interesting, just kind of very quickly observing how our male students identified, their first 5 statements were very much about their identity within a professional world. So I am a project manager, I am a financial expert, I am this, I am. Whereas the women tended to identify as I am a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I am a female. It was really, really very interesting. And in hindsight, I really should have done something with that. But I am, as you've indicated, there are multiple identities that we all have to work with and engage with, and it's something that we continue to think about, I guess, and they take different shapes, and as I guess we grow older and develop in our careers, we understand which parts of the identity we pull on as and when we need to. But maybe if I continue addressing the identity bit, and then we can come back to the broader challenge. Undoubtedly, one of the challenges as a female Arab leader who evidently looks female and looks Arab is the idea that I feel that I have to continually reassert my credibility, whereas maybe others don't need to do so much. I'm not sure whether that is in my own head or whether that's a reality, but I definitely feel I have to do that in the way I dress, in the way I conduct myself, and in the way I approach many situations. So the assumption is always questioned as to why you are there, rather than, well, you're obviously there because you are qualified to be there. So it's having to reassert that on an ongoing basis is something that I've made peace with. But it's, you kind of think that in this day and age, in 2024, we shouldn't have to. And I will go back to a quote that Professor Louise Richardson once said to me, or a statement she said, but I am quoting her. Professor Louise Richardson was the first female Vice Chancellor of the University of Oxford, UK. And I'd invited her to Muscat to give a speech, a public lecture. And she said, I will celebrate the day when we no longer celebrate the first woman anything. And I think that's really quite powerful in the sense that why are we today still saying, the first woman is, but that's the reality, and we have to accept and move forward with that. I've tried to make sure, and I hope I've been able, I like to think that I've been at least partially successful in that. Part of my responsibility is that I support others, female or otherwise, in terms of creating that sense of security and ability to progress, and the mentorship and the role modeling, I guess, but also the ability to have the conversation, to be frank and open about it, and not have to hide behind anything. So I like to have that kind of approach. And that's where I've drawn on some of the challenge I guess I've faced throughout. And the other thing to bear in mind is I've really not had any role models in my own life in terms of career. I've had a few women who have had jobs around me, but I haven't had, in my own immediate circle, I haven't had any career women. So it's been, I'm conscious of that for that next generation, my daughter and others who are trying to do that, who may not be having, career women around them. And it comes at a price, and it still comes at a cost, and conscious of some of the compromises you have to make. But, it's a worthy road to go down. So drawing on that identity. Having said that, though, I think there is a little bit of a misconception in the wider world around the challenge for women, particularly in education, actually, in this part of the world. Education is probably the most welcoming for women in the Gulf and in the Middle East generally. It is education is seen as very much a vocation for women and something that women do well. So it's evident that that you will get leadership within female leadership here in the UAE at the moment. The Director General of the KHDA is a woman. In Oman, the Minister for Higher Education as well. Actually, the Minister for Education were both women. In Bahrain, the Undersecretary for Higher Education was a woman. So it is not uncommon to see other women. So you do not go into a room full of men. There are still occasions, of course, when you go into meetings and it is a room full of men, and that's normal. But there are women in really good high leadership positions who are doing an excellent job of providing that road for others. So I think it's not an untrodden path, but it's a path that needs to be cleared up a bit more, possibly, to create that ability to rise along the ranks and maybe not have to make so many compromises along the way. So that's kind of the identity piece, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can talk about. But in terms of the sector, I joined higher education about 22, 23 years ago, and it's a very different world. I'm sure, I mean, you can reflect yourself. It's a very, very different world to the world that I joined when I did. The pace of, I think the two things that strike me are the pace of change in the wider world. So the size of the challenge is huge, but also the pace of change is really quite immense. And the challenge we as universities have is learning to keep up with that. Universities historically are slow machines to move. They're quite caught up in a lot of systems and processes and procedures and approvals and all of that. And that's there for good reason. But the world is at a stage where we need to rethink some of those in order to make sure that we are able to respond to the developing needs of our market, of our ecosystem, and of our students, our customers at the end of the day.
Can you give me a couple of examples, particularly around students, because the student experience is very different for students now than it was for you and then me even longer ago. So what are the challenges facing students that you in your role and your institution are really grappling with?
Well, I mean, the most obvious one, and one that, you can't go to any conference and you can't read any, articles or opinion pieces or anything without coming across in one way or another, is the use of technology in our teaching, in our pedagogy, in our assessment, technology is here to stay. And technology is actually a huge opportunity. That's how we must look at it. We cannot see it as a demon or a devil that is going to, take away all integrity. It is absolutely not. It is a tool that we need to learn to embrace and use more effectively. The challenge is getting our heads around, well, how can we do that? And how can we do that efficiently, effectively, whilst understanding the need for students to deep dive into some of the content rather than surface, what's the summary here? Help me out here, AI, and give me what I need to do to pass this module. So that would be the most obvious example, I think, in terms of we as an institution, how can we use technology? How can we use not just AI? How can we use assessments more effectively? How can we use, development of our material more effectively? Take, for example, if you're teaching something in computer science or in, any of the kind of the tech end of the STEM, what if it takes a student 4 years or 3 years at best to complete the program, and the program has been approved at least a year before it was launched, that's 4 years at best. What's happened to the technology that we're teaching in year 4 of that 4-year program in terms of market relevance? How can we ensure that we remain relevant, and what we teach is more about the skills of learning rather than the actual content? And I think that's the big question for universities now, is what is really our role and how can we help students better deal with that? So there are a range of challenges, that will affect us. And we're getting there in terms of some of the answers, I think. We're definitely much better at working with outside of the university sector. So we're much better at building the bridges with industry, at building the bridges with other stakeholders and understanding their needs and responding to their needs, and being a little bit more agile in how we interact. And I think that's something I've witnessed since I've joined academia. You know, within those 2 decades, the links with industry are much stronger and much more robust. And industry also sees, in my view, particularly here in this part of the world, there are real strides to getting industry to recognize and realize the opportunities within universities, how they can help industry, whereas that probably wasn't the case 15 years ago. Whereas now there is a realization, oh, they're on our doorstep, you know, all the knowledge we need is there, it's on our doorstep. So what can we do to do that? How can we handle that better? So there are plenty of opportunities. So I'm very optimistic about some of those opportunities going forward.
When you were talking, I was thinking about your starting life in the business sector. How did that early sort of formation of you as a professional, in inverted commas, impact on how you understood the world of higher education and how you're navigating it now?
Well, so interesting you say that, because I still refer to how we do business, if you like, in the business world. So you can see it's really quite deeply ingrained in how I have been professionally brought up, if you like. Not only that, I think there is plenty of opportunity for academia in general to learn from how things are done differently, potentially, in a business setting. For a very simple example of having stand-up meetings rather than sit-down meetings, you know, in insurance, that's very common. You know, you'd have your meeting standing up, which does make for a shorter meeting, I have to say, but not necessarily common in academia, to things like, you know, breaking up processes and rebuilding them to ensure efficiency, and so on and so forth. One of the things that is directly impacted by my own experience in industry is my commitment to placements and my genuine belief in the importance of, you know, internships. But I'm not talking about 6-week internships here. I'm talking about, you know, longer embedding of students into a work setting, which helps them really understand and apply some of the knowledge that they've gained. This was something we had when I was in Liverpool. This is something that I'm very proud to say was able to implement for the first time in Oman, and it was a compulsory part of the program, and it had real positive impacts on student experience and onward employability. And I do think that appreciation of our ability as an academic institution to only impact so much. So we can only teach students so much within those 4 walls, and we have to let them out into the big bad world to learn the realities, and then come back and implement and reflect on some of those in their final year. So I'm a big supporter of industry relations, industry speakers, industry placements. That I believe comes from my initial kind of period in industry myself, and seeing the value of that, I guess, in my onward career.
So when you're talking, I'm now starting to imagine the students in your institution. What do you want students to graduate with, and what will be the mark of the students from your institution that will differentiate them from University of Wollongong in Dubai and the various other international campuses that are there? So what will be the distinctive mark of the Birmingham Dubai graduate?
What a wonderful question, Judyth. We pride ourselves on our ability to bring together really important elements of the educational portfolio. So it is not only the content, which is obviously the kind of the cutting edge in terms of where the world is at in that particular discipline, but that is fed through high-level research. So it is informed by the highest level research. So we're very much at the top. So we're number 80 in the world globally as an institution. We're number 80 as per the QS. So that tells you a little bit about where we are in terms of our research and also our research ambition. As an institution, we have an ambition to be within the top 50 by 2030. So you can see the focus on research, but that's not just research for pure research, for the sake of pure research. It is research that feeds into our teaching. And that will ultimately impact how our students engage with the material that they've been exposed to. So that's one element of what would define a University of Birmingham student. In fact, whether it's Birmingham Dubai or Birmingham UK, it is that is what we aspire to do for all students. So it's one university, two different campuses. So that's in terms of the educational part in the content and discipline specifics. But actually, it is much broader than that. It is about the exposure that students have to a very, very broad set of experiences of extracurricular activities. As a campus, we have over 96 nationalities on campus. So the diversity, whilst is not only replicated in Dubai, because it is a very diverse city, but actually it's also reflected on campus as well. We create opportunities for the students to travel across campuses, but also beyond to our other partner institutions. So that's the other distinctive feature, is that our students are able to really tap into experiences beyond the direct University of Birmingham Dubai. But it is about challenging students. It's about helping them step outside of their comfort zone and giving them the knowledge, the skills, the soft skills that they will need going forward for their global presence. So we're not creating students who will only be able to, get a job in the UK or get a job in Dubai. We are creating, graduates and alumni that are global players, and that's what it's all about. That's the difference that we're making.
I've got two more questions. If there was one thing that you could do to support students in your university now, what would that be?
One thing I could do to support students, I hope I would have lots of opportunities to support students in many different ways. I think one of the things we could all get better at is getting students to really embed in campus life. And that's when I say campus life, it's not just the University of Birmingham Dubai, but universities in the region more fully, to really utilize campus life more fully, so that it is the extracurricular, it is the sporting, it is the clubs. We're privileged with the number of clubs and activities that go on, but that for me is something. If I had my time again, I'd do more of that. And it's something that I would want for my students as well, because you can get carried away with the 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 importance of the academic. Probably not correct for me to say this. It is very important to focus on your academics, but also it is also equally important to focus on your ability to engage with campus. But I would also add to that, Judyth, that we have a lot of postgraduate students as well. So it's really important that we allow students to or appreciate the different requirement set for students at different stages. Having done my own PhD as a mature part-time student with work commitments and family commitments, the appreciation of students at different stages in their careers is really important as well. So I think that's something that generally as institutions we need to be more conscious of.
The last question is actually getting back to you. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Gosh, if I had my time again. I guess I would say that I probably took myself too seriously. I was very focused on doing the next thing and what's getting the degree or doing well in the degree or passing that next exam or getting that next job and whatever. And I forgot to enjoy the ride sometimes along the way. I forgot to possibly, if I had my time again, I'd probably think more carefully about the amount of stress I was putting into some of those activities. But that's easier said than done. That's the beauty of hindsight, I guess. I'm privileged. I'm very thankful for the journey that I've had. But yeah, there are times when you think, oh, slow down a little. That's what I would probably tell myself.
Thank you for letting me spend 48 minutes of absolute joy with you this afternoon. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have.
Absolutely, genuinely. Thank you so much, Judyth. I've really enjoyed it.
And I hope that our paths do cross at some stage.
Likewise.
You have been listening to Studiosity's podcast, Reimagining Higher Education, candid conversations within higher education, sharing stories of leadership, change, and best practice in teaching and learning. Visit studiosity.com.